Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the handle of the commercial vacuum cleaner. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday in downtown San Francisco, and the 40th floor of the Chen Technologies Tower hummed with the kind of silence that only exists after everyone important has gone home. Everyone except Marcus Chen himself, apparently. She had seen him before, of course. Everyone who worked the night shift in this building knew the billionaire's face from the enormous portrait in the lobby, from magazine covers at grocery store checkouts, from the occasional late-night encounter in an empty hallway. But she had never been this close to him, close enough to smell the expensive cologne that probably cost more than her monthly rent, close enough to see the particular shade of exhaustion around his eyes that no amount of money could erase. Marcus stood in front of the Steinway grand piano that occupied the corner of the executive lounge, a glass of something amber in his hand. The piano had always struck Sarah as obscene, a $1 million instrument sitting in a corporate office where no one ever played it. Just another piece of furniture to signal wealth and taste. She had dusted it every Thursday night for 3 years, her cleaning cloth gliding across the polished ebony surface, careful not to leave streaks. "You ever play?" Marcus asked suddenly, not turning around. Sarah froze. The vacuum cleaner motor whined in the silence. She hadn't realized he was aware of her presence. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Now he turned, and something in his expression made her stomach tighten. It wasn't cruelty exactly, more like the casual curiosity of someone who had stopped seeing the people who cleaned up after him as fully human years ago. "The piano," he said, gesturing with his glass. "Do you play?" I used to, sir. A long time ago." "How long ago?" Sarah's throat felt dry. 23 years. Marcus laughed, a short bark of sound that echoed off the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. 23 years. That's almost as long as I've been building this company. He took a long swallow of his drink, then set the glass down on the piano lid. Sarah winced internally. The condensation would leave a ring. "Tell you what," Marcus said, and something in his tone had shifted, taken on an edge of challenge. "Play something for me, right now. Play this Chopin piece." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and Chopin's Ballade No. 1 began to play from the speaker. "And I'll actually listen, really listen. Not like the performances I pay for at charity galas where I'm thinking about quarterly earnings the whole time." He was drunk, Sarah realized. Not stumbling drunk, but past the point where a man with his kind of power should be making decisions about other people. "Sir, I really should finish—" "Come on," he interrupted, and now there was something almost desperate in his voice. "Entertain me. Play. What's the worst that can happen? You've already got the worst job in this building." The words hit her like a slap, not because they were cruel, though they were, but because they were true. Or at least they appeared true from the outside. Night shift cleaner at 48 years old, invisible to everyone who mattered, counting down the hours until her shift ended and she could take the BART back to her studio apartment in Oakland. "I don't have the sheet music," Sarah said quietly. "You said you used to play. Can't you remember?" 23 years. The last time she had touched a piano was at the conservatory, before everything had fallen apart, before her mother's cancer diagnosis, before the medical bills, before she had dropped out of Juilliard 3 months before graduation and never gone back. Sarah looked at Marcus Chen, at his expensive suit and his drunken certainty that he could command performance from her like he commanded everything else in his life. She thought about telling him no. She thought about explaining that some parts of your past you can't just summon on demand, that some doors close and stay closed. Instead, she heard herself say, "I'll need you to move your glass." Something flickered across Marcus's face. Surprise, maybe, or interest. He picked up the glass and stepped back. "By all means." Sarah turned off the vacuum cleaner. The silence that followed felt enormous. She walked to the piano bench, her worn sketches squeaking slightly on the marble floor. Her cleaning uniform, navy blue polyester with Bay Area Facilities Management embroidered on the breast pocket, felt suddenly, absurdly conspicuous. She sat down. The bench height was wrong for her, set too low. She adjusted it with fingers that remembered exactly how to twist the knobs, even after all these years. The piano bench at Juilliard had been temperamental too, one leg slightly shorter than the others. Sarah placed her hands on the keys. They were cold, perfectly maintained, but never played. She took a breath and closed her eyes. The first notes came from somewhere deep in her muscle memory, a place untouched by time or circumstances. The opening of Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, gentle, questioning, deceptively simple. Her fingers found the patterns they had practiced 10,000 times in another life. Then the music began to build, to shift. The playful theme gave way to something darker, more urgent. Sarah's hands moved across the keyboard with increasing confidence, the years falling away. She had forgotten how this felt, the way the music could take over your body, how you stopped being the person playing and became instead a conduit for something larger. The second theme erupted, passionate, almost violent. Her left hand pounded out the bass while her right hand wove intricate melodic lines. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she was aware that she was playing in a corporate office at midnight in her cleaning uniform, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the music and the way it poured out of her like something that had been trapped for 23 years, waiting. The technical passages came back to her with startling clarity. The cross-hand leaps, the cascading runs, the delicate balance between power and control. Her shoulders ached. She wasn't used to this anymore. Her body had forgotten the physical demands of playing at this level, but she pushed through. The coda approached, the final tumultuous section where everything the piece has been building toward comes crashing together in a storm of sound. Sarah's fingers flew, no longer thinking about each note, but surrendering completely to the momentum of the music. And then, suddenly, it was over. The final chord resonated in the silence, dying away slowly, leaving behind only the sound of her own ragged breathing. Sarah opened her eyes. Marcus Chen was standing exactly where she had left him, but his expression had changed completely. The casual cruelty was gone, replaced by something she couldn't quite name. His glass dangled forgotten in his hand. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Before Sarah could answer, she heard the sound of clapping. She turned to see that a small crowd had gathered in the doorway, other late-night workers, a security guard, someone from the IT department. They must have heard the music and come to investigate. "That was incredible," someone said. "I mean, holy shit, that was actually incredible." Sarah stood up from the bench, her legs unsteady. The reality of what she had just done was beginning to sink in. She had played. After 23 years of silence, she had played. And not just played, but performed, poured everything she had ever been into those 9 minutes of music. Marcus was still staring at her. "Who are you?" he asked again. "I'm Sarah," she said quietly. "I clean the 40th floor on the Thursday night shift." She paused, then added, because suddenly it felt important to say it out loud, "And I used to be a pianist." "Used to be?" Marcus repeated. "No, no one who plays like that used to be anything." He pulled out his phone again, his fingers moving quickly despite the alcohol. "What's your full name?" "Sarah Mitchell." He typed, scrolled, his frown deepening. Then his eyes widened. "Holy shit! Sarah Mitchell, Juilliard dropout, 2001. You were a prodigy. You won the Busoni competition when you were 19. There's an article here about you. The next Martha Argerich, it says. You just disappeared." Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the old panic trying to claw its way back. "I need to finish my shift." "No," Marcus said, and there was a strange intensity in his voice now. No, you need to tell me what happened. How does someone go from winning international competitions to cleaning offices? The answer was long and complicated and painful, involving choices made and chances lost, and the grinding machinery of American healthcare costs. But Sarah didn't owe this drunk billionaire her life story, didn't owe him anything except a clean floor and emptied trash cans. "Life happened," she said simply. "Excuse me, sir. I really do need to finish." She walked past him, past the small crowd in the doorway, back to where she had left the vacuum cleaner. Her hands were still trembling, but now for different reasons. She had played. After all these years, she had touched a piano, and the music had been there, waiting unchanged. Behind her, she heard Marcus say something to the security guard, heard footsteps, but she focused on the vacuum cleaner, on the familiar task of pushing it across the expensive carpet. The 40th floor wasn't going to clean itself, and she still had 6 more hours before her shift ended. But as she worked, Sarah couldn't stop her fingers from twitching, remembering the feel of the keys, the weight of the hammers, the pure physical joy of making sound. Something had broken open inside her, and she didn't know if she could close it again. She didn't know if she wanted to. Sarah's alarm went off at 2:30 p.m., the same time it had gone off every weekday for the past 3 years. She slapped at her phone until the beeping stopped, then lay in bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her studio apartment in Oakland's Fruitvale district. Her hands ached, her shoulders burned, and when she closed her eyes, she could still hear the echo of Chopin in her mind. She had not expected to sleep, but exhaustion had taken her under sometime around 8 a.m., pulling her down into dreams filled with piano keys and concert halls and her mother's hospital room, the 3 things that had defined the year 2001. Now, in the grey afternoon light filtering through her thin curtains, the events of the previous night felt almost unreal. Had she really played? Had Marcus Chen really looked at her like she was a person instead of part of the furniture? Her phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor at Bay Area Facilities Management. "Call me ASAP. Important." Sarah's stomach dropped. She had been late to finish her rounds last night, distracted by the piano incident. Maybe someone had complained. Maybe Marcus Chen had complained. Rich people were unpredictable that way. They could be fascinated by you one moment and annoyed by your presumption the next. She dialed the number, her heart hammering. "Sarah!" Jerry's voice was weirdly excited. "What the hell did you do last night?" I'm sorry if I was behind schedule." "Behind schedule?" "Sarah, Marcus Chen called me personally. Do you know how many years I've worked for this company? 12. Do you know how many times the owner of one of our client buildings has called me personally? 0. Until today." Sarah closed her eyes. "I can explain. He wants to hire you." The words didn't make sense. Sarah sat up in bed, her blanket falling away. "What?" "Not through us. Directly. As his." "I don't even know what. Personal pianist? Entertainment coordinator?" He was kind of vague, but he wants you to call him. Jerry paused. "Sarah, what happened last night?" "I played piano for him," Sarah said slowly. "He asked me to play, and I did." "Jesus, must have been some playing." Jerry cleared his throat. "Look, I'm supposed to give you his assistant's number, but Sarah, between you and me, be careful. Rich guys like that, they get ideas. They think they can buy anything, fix anything. I don't know what he's offering, but make sure you know what you're getting into." "Jerry, I can't just quit. He's offering to pay out your contract, wants you to start immediately. Like I said, he called me personally." Jerry sighed. "I gotta give you the number. Company policy. What you do with it is your business." After Sarah hung up, she sat on the edge of her mattress, staring at the digits she had scrawled on the back of an envelope. Her studio apartment looked even more depressing in the afternoon light. The kitchenette with its single burner, the bathroom where the shower leaked, the folding table that served as both desk and dining area. 23 years ago, she had lived in a dorm room at Juilliard with a roommate who was now playing with the Berlin Philharmonic. Sarah had Googled her once, late at night, and immediately regretted it. This apartment was what happened when you made all the right choices for all the right reasons and still ended up drowning. Her mother had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer on March 15, 2001. Sarah had been in the middle of her final semester at Juilliard, 3 months away from graduating with honors, fielding offers from prestigious conservatories for graduate programs. The world had been opening up before her like a flower. She had taken a leave of absence, just temporary, she had told herself, just until Mom was stable. But pancreatic cancer didn't care about your plans or your potential. Her mother had died 4 months later, on July 22, 2001, leaving behind medical bills that exceeded $500,000. Sarah's father had died when she was 6. There was no one else. Just Sarah and a mountain of debt that her mother's insurance had barely dented. The hospital had been very understanding, very sympathetic, and utterly inflexible about payment plans. She had not gone back to Juilliard. How could she? The tuition alone was impossible, and besides, she needed to work. She had taken a job as a receptionist at a dental office, then as a waitress, then doing data entry, each job a little further from music, a little deeper into the ordinary struggle of making rent and buying groceries and paying down debt that never seemed to shrink. The piano became something she couldn't afford to think about. Not financially. She couldn't afford a piano, obviously, but also emotionally. Every time she passed a music store or heard classical music in a coffee shop, something inside her would twist with such acute pain that she learned to avoid these triggers entirely. She stopped listening to music. She stopped going near pianos. She built a life that had nothing to do with the person she had been. And it had worked, more or less, until last night. Sarah looked at the phone number again. She should just ignore it. This was clearly some kind of whim, a drunk billionaire's passing fancy. By tomorrow, he would have forgotten all about the cleaning lady who played Chopin. But her fingers were already dialing. Chen Technologies, executive offices. The voice was crisp, professional, female. Hi. I'm calling for... My name is Sarah Mitchell. I was told to... Ms. Mitchell. Yes, Mr. Chen has been expecting your call. Please hold. Before Sarah could protest, there was a click, and then Marcus Chen's voice. Sarah, thank you for calling. He sounded completely different from last night. Alert, focused, sober. It made her more nervous, somehow. Mr. Chen, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think... Don't say no yet. Just hear me out. 5 minutes. Can you give me 5 minutes? Sarah looked around her apartment, at the life she had built from the wreckage of her dreams. 5 minutes. I stayed up all night researching you, Marcus said, without preamble. Watched old competition videos on YouTube. You were extraordinary, are extraordinary. That performance last night was. It was the most real thing I've heard in years. Mr. Chen, I want to fund you, he continued, speaking quickly now, as if afraid she would hang up. Full funding for you to complete your degree, if you want, or private instruction with whoever you want to study with, performance opportunities, whatever you need to return to music at the level you should be at. Sarah's throat had closed up. I don't understand. Why would you do that? There was a long pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed, become less certain. You know what my company does? Software, cloud computing, something with AI? Yeah, we make tools that help other companies optimize their workforce, efficiency algorithms. My flagship product can analyze employee productivity and recommend who to promote, who to retrain, who to let go. It's made me $3 billion. Another pause. Last night, I watched someone I had categorized as low-value labor play piano better than performers I've paid $20,000 to see. And I realized that my entire fortune is built on the assumption that I can accurately assess people's worth, that I can reduce humans to data points. I still don't understand what this has to do with me. I want to prove I was wrong, Marcus said simply. I want to invest in you the way I should have noticed you were worth investing in the first time I passed you in that hallway and didn't see you at all. He cleared his throat. Also, I'm starting a new initiative. Arts funding. Corporate social responsibility. I need someone to run it, someone who understands what it means to be on the other side of opportunity. I want that person to be you. Sarah's head was spinning. Mr. Chen, I clean offices. I don't know anything about running programs or corporate whatever. You know about music. You know about what happens to talented people when they fall through the cracks. That's more important than business experience. His voice became softer. Look, I'm not asking you to decide right now. Just meet with me. Come to my office Monday morning, 9 a.m. We'll talk. If you decide you're not interested, fine, but at least hear the full proposal. Sarah wanted to say no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was a mistake, that people like Marcus Chen didn't just hand out second chances, that there had to be a catch. But another part of her, the part that had remembered every note of that Chopin ballade after 23 years, was whispering something different. Monday, she heard herself say. 9 a.m., but I'm not promising anything. That's all I'm asking. She could hear the smile in his voice. Oh, and Sarah, do me a favor. Go play somewhere this weekend. There's a music store on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley that has practice rooms you can rent by the hour. I'll call ahead, set up an account for you. Just play. Remember what it feels like. After she hung up, Sarah sat in her apartment for a long time, her hands resting on her knees, her fingers still remembering the shape of the keys. Outside, Oakland moved through its Friday afternoon rhythm. Kids getting out of school, buses grinding past, someone's radio playing musica norteña from a window across the street. She thought about her mother, who had worked 2 jobs to pay for piano lessons they couldn't really afford, who had driven Sarah to competitions across the country, sleeping in the car to save money on hotels, who had cried when Sarah got into Juilliard, not because she was sad, but because she was so proud she couldn't contain it. What would her mother think about this offer? Would she tell Sarah to be careful, to protect herself? Or would she tell her daughter to stop being afraid of the thing she loved most in the world? Sarah pulled out her laptop and Googled the music store on Shattuck Avenue. The website showed rows of practice rooms with upright pianos, hourly rates, a booking system. She could be there in 30 minutes if she took the BART. Her hands were shaking again, but this time with something that felt almost like hope. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, leaving behind the studio apartment and the alarm clock set for 2:30 p.m. and the life she had built around the absence of music. She didn't know what would happen Monday at 9 a.m. She didn't know if Marcus Chen's offer was real or just another version of how rich people played with other people's lives. But she knew that she needed to feel piano keys under her fingers again, needed to know if last night had been a fluke, or if the music was still there, waiting. The BART ride to Berkeley felt like the longest 20 minutes of her life. The practice room was smaller than Sarah remembered from her days at Juilliard, barely 8 feet square, with foam padding on the walls and a single window overlooking the Berkeley street. But the piano was decent, a Kawai upright that had been well maintained, and when Sarah sat down on Monday morning to wait for her meeting with Marcus, her hands found the keys like they had never left. She had spent 6 hours at this music store over the weekend, playing everything she could remember: Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Bach, Debussy. Her technique was rusty. She flubbed passages she used to be able to play in her sleep, but underneath the rust was something solid, something that 23 years hadn't been able to erode completely. Now, sitting in the waiting area outside Marcus Chen's office, dressed in the only professional outfit she owned, a black skirt and white blouse she had bought at Target 3 years ago, Sarah felt the full weight of what she was about to do. If she walked through that door, she wasn't just accepting a job. She was reopening every door she had carefully closed, exposing every wound she had learned to live with. "Ms. Mitchell." The assistant from the phone, a woman in her 30s with perfectly styled black hair and a tablet tucked under her arm, appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Chen is ready for you." Sarah stood, her legs unsteady. She had cleaned this office building for 3 years, but never been higher than the 40th floor. Marcus's office was on the 45th, the executive level, where the air seemed cleaner and the carpets thicker, and everything spoke quietly about money. The office itself was surprisingly understated, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, a minimalist desk, bookshelves lined with technical manuals and business biographies. The only personal touch was a photograph on the desk. Marcus with an older woman who shared his features, both of them standing in front of what looked like a restaurant. "My mother," Marcus said, noticing Sarah's gaze. He was standing by the window, dressed in jeans and a black turtleneck that Sarah recognized as the uniform of tech billionaires, trying to look like Steve Jobs. She immigrated from Taiwan in the 70s, worked as a seamstress in a garment factory in Los Angeles, saved every penny to send me to Stanford. He turned to face Sarah. "She died 2 years ago. Heart attack, very sudden." "I'm sorry," Sarah said, and meant it. "Yeah." Marcus gestured to the chairs arranged around a small conference table. "Please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Water is fine." While Marcus poured from a glass pitcher, Sarah studied him more carefully than she had been able to on Thursday night. He was younger than she had thought initially, maybe 40, 42. There were grey streaks in his black hair and lines around his eyes that suggested he didn't sleep enough. Everything about him radiated control, precision, the careful management of time and resources. "So," Marcus said, sitting across from her, "let's talk about what I'm actually proposing." For the next 30 minutes, he laid out a plan that seemed both incredibly generous and slightly insane. He wanted to create an arts initiative within Chen Technologies focused on finding and supporting adult artists who had been lost to circumstance. His phrase. Sarah would be the director responsible for creating the program structure, selecting recipients, managing the budget. "I'm thinking we start with music," Marcus said, "since that's your area of expertise. But eventually we could expand to other arts, visual, performing, literary. The goal is to find people like you, genuinely talented individuals who fell out of the system not because they weren't good enough, but because life got in the way. And my role would be administrative primarily, creating the application process, reviewing candidates, conducting interviews, making final selections. You'd have a team, assistant, financial manager, probably a few consultants in different artistic disciplines. Starting salary would be $150 plus benefits and a discretionary budget for program development. Sarah had to work to keep her expression neutral. $150. $1,000 was more money than she had made in the last 4 years combined. "But," Marcus continued, "there's also a personal component. I want you to return to performing, not because it's required for the job, but because I think you need it, and because I think you could be great again." He pulled out a folder from the desk and slid it across the table. "I've been in contact with several prominent teachers. 3 of them have agreed to audition you. If you're accepted by any of them, I'll cover the cost of lessons, practice space, anything you need." Sarah opened the folder. The names swam before her eyes. Teachers who had been legends when she was at Juilliard, people who normally only took students who were already on the cusp of major careers. "Mr. Chen," Marcus, please. Marcus, this is incredibly generous. But I have to ask, why me? And don't give me the speech about proving you were wrong about worker productivity. There has to be more to it than that. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table. Finally, he said, "When I was at Stanford, I wanted to be a physicist, not a businessman, not an entrepreneur. I wanted to study string theory, contribute to pure research, but my mother was getting older, and the garment factory had closed, and I knew that physics PhDs make $30,000 a year as postdocs while waiting for tenure-track positions that might never come." He looked out the window at the San Francisco skyline. "So I pivoted to computer science, got my MBA, started a company, made a fortune, and I told myself it was fine because I was successful, because I was taking care of my mother, because money is a reasonable substitute for doing what you actually love." "But it's not," Sarah said quietly. "No, it's really not." Marcus turned back to her. "My mother died thinking I was happy. I never told her that I lie awake at night thinking about the papers I could have written, the research I could have contributed to. And now it's too late. I'm 43. I've been out of physics for 20 years, and the field has moved on without me." He paused. "But you're not too late, Sarah. You're 48. If you work at it, really work at it, you could have another 30 years of performing, maybe more. You could do everything you were supposed to do before your mother got sick." The mention of her mother made Sarah's chest tighten. "You investigated me pretty thoroughly." "I did. I'm sorry if that feels invasive, but I wanted to understand what happened, why someone with your talent disappeared." "And what did you conclude?" "That you made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. That our healthcare system is designed to bankrupt people. That talent isn't enough in a country where medical debt can destroy you." Marcus's expression hardened. "And that I've made billions building systems that treat people like you as disposable, while treating people like me as geniuses, when the only real difference is luck and circumstances." Sarah looked down at the folder, at the names of teachers who could potentially change her life. She thought about her studio apartment in Oakland, about the Thursday night shifts that had defined her existence for 3 years, about the mountain of debt she had finally paid off 2 years ago. She thought about her mother, who had never lived to see Sarah play at Carnegie Hall like they had dreamed. "If I accept this," Sarah said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I'm not a charity case. I'm not a redemption story for your guilt about capitalism. If I direct this program, I'm going to do it my way, with my standards. And if I study with one of these teachers, I'm doing it because I want to return to music, not because you need to feel like you saved someone." A smile tugged at Marcus's mouth. "I wouldn't want it any other way. And I want creative control over the program. You can set the budget, but I decide who gets funded and how. No interference, no pressure to pick feel-good stories for PR purposes." "Agreed. And I want it in writing that I can walk away at any time, for any reason, without penalty. If this doesn't work, if I can't handle being back in the music world, I'm gone. No questions asked. Done." Marcus stood and extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Sarah looked at his hand for a long moment. This was it, the moment where she decided whether to step back into the life she had left behind or to keep playing it safe in the small world she had built. Her hands ached from the weekend of practice. Her mind was full of music she hadn't let herself think about in 2 decades. She stood and shook his hand. "We have a deal." 2 weeks later, Sarah played her audition for Professor Elena Kozlov, a Russian pianist who had defected in the 80s and now taught at the San Francisco Conservatory. Sarah chose Beethoven's Sonata, number 32, the last sonata Beethoven wrote. A piece about endings and transformations, about finding beauty in what remains. Her hands shook on the opening bars. She missed notes she should have been able to play. Her pedaling was muddy in places. But as the piece progressed, something shifted. The music took over, and Sarah stopped being a 48-year-old woman afraid of failing and became again the thing she had been born to be. A conduit for sound, a translator of emotion into motion. When she finished, Professor Kozlov sat in silence for a long moment. Then she said in her thick Russian accent, "You have been away too long. Your technique is messy, your interpretation is sometimes confused, but—" She paused, fixing Sarah with an intense gaze. "You have something most of my students will never have. You have lived. You have suffered. This music is not abstract to you, it is your life." Sarah's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I will take you as my student," Professor Kozlov continued. "But I warn you, I am not kind. I will work you harder than you have been worked in your life, and even then, there is no guarantee you will return to the level you were at 23 years ago." "I know," Sarah said. "Good, then we begin Thursday, 4 o'clock. Do not be late." Sarah left the conservatory in a daze, stepping out into the San Francisco afternoon. The city spread before her, busy, indifferent, full of people living their own complicated lives. Somewhere in this city, there were probably other Sarah Mitchells, other people who had been talented once and had lost their way, people who cleaned offices or drove buses or answered phones, carrying inside them the ghosts of who they might have been. She pulled out her phone and texted Marcus. "I'm in. She accepted me." His response came immediately. "Congratulations. You earned this." Had she? Sarah wasn't sure. But as she walked through the city toward the BART station, her fingers moved unconsciously, practicing passages from the Beethoven Sonata, and for the first time in 23 years, the music inside her head didn't hurt. It felt like coming home. 6 months after Sarah played Chopin for a drunk billionaire at midnight, she stood backstage at the Herbst Theatre, waiting to perform in public for the first time in 23 years. The occasion was modest, not Carnegie Hall, not even a major recital, just a showcase for Professor Kozlov's students, a twice-yearly event that attracted maybe 200 people, mostly families and music enthusiasts. But Sarah's hands were shaking like she was about to walk onto the stage at the Kennedy Center. "You are breathing?" Professor Kozlov appeared beside her, small and fierce in a black dress, her grey hair pulled back in the same severe bun she wore to every lesson. "Trying to," Sarah managed. "Good. Is important to breathe." Kozlov studied her critically. "You have prepared well. 6 months you have worked harder than students half your age, but still you are afraid." "Yes, this is also good. Fear means you care, means it matters." Kozlov placed a surprisingly strong hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You know what I think when I first hear you audition. I think here is someone who knows what it costs to make music. Most of my students, they are talented, yes, but they have never lost anything. They do not understand that every note you play could be the last note you ever play. They take it for granted. You will never take it for granted again." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Now go," Kozlov said. "Show them what 23 years of silence sounds like when it finally breaks." The stage lights were bright after the dimness of the wings. Sarah walked to the piano, a concert grand, beautiful and terrifying, and adjusted the bench. The audience was a blur of faces, indistinct in the glare. She could make out Marcus in the third row, and next to him, surprisingly, Jerry from Bay Area Facilities Management, who had called her last week to congratulate her on the new job and tell her she was missed on the Thursday night shift. Sarah had chosen Schubert's Piano Sonata in B-flat major for tonight, the last sonata Schubert wrote before his death at 31. It was a piece about mortality and acceptance, about finding peace with the fact that not everything in life goes according to plan. It was also technically demanding, emotionally complex, and possibly too ambitious for her first performance back. Professor Kozlov had approved the choice immediately. Sarah placed her hands on the keys and took one final breath. Then she began. The opening was gentle, almost questioning, a simple melody that Schubert would develop and transform over the next 40 minutes. Sarah's hands found the notes, her fingers remembering the thousands of hours she had practiced over the past 6 months. But more than technique, more than precision, she poured into the music everything she had learned in her 23 years away from it. She played the years of cleaning offices, the feeling of invisibility, the weight of debt and duty. She played her mother's hospital room and the choice to leave Juilliard, and the moment she realized she might never play piano again. She played the studio apartment in Oakland and the BART rides and the particular exhaustion of night shifts. But she also played the moment Marcus had challenged her, the feeling of her hands on piano keys for the first time in decades, the slow, painful, joyful process of remembering who she used to be. She played Professor Kozlov's brutal honesty and the students in the conservatory practice rooms, and the first time she made it through a difficult passage without mistakes. She played hope and fear and the strange mercy of second chances. The second movement was a meditation, slow, introspective, searching. Sarah let herself sink into it, feeling the way Schubert built tension through patience rather than drama. This was music that understood that not everything needed to be resolved quickly, that sometimes you had to sit with difficult emotions and let them unfold in their own time. In the audience, she saw someone wiping their eyes. Further back, a man had closed his eyes, his head moving slightly with the music. These strangers were hearing her story without knowing it was her story, connecting to Schubert's genius through her imperfect, heartfelt translation. The third movement brought a change in energy, lighter, more playful, a brief respite before the final movement's complex journey. Sarah's fingers danced across the keys, her body remembering the physical joy of playing, the way music could be work and play simultaneously. And then the final movement began, and Sarah knew she was approaching the hardest part, the section she had struggled with for weeks. A series of cascading runs, followed by a technically demanding passage that required absolute control and precision. In practice, she had sometimes nailed it, sometimes collapsed in the middle. Professor Kozlov had told her that inconsistency was normal, that she should trust her preparation and not overthink it. Sarah didn't overthink it. She just played, surrendering to the momentum of the music, letting muscle memory and instinct take over. And somehow, miraculously, her fingers found every note, executed every turn and trill, navigated every leap. The passage flew by, and she was through it, into the contemplative coda that brought the piece full circle. The final chord resonated in the hall, dying away slowly. Sarah lifted her hands from the keys and sat for a moment, letting the silence complete the performance. Then she stood and turned to face the audience. They were standing, not all of them, but many, their applause filling the theatre. Sarah bowed, her vision blurring with tears, and when she straightened, she could see Marcus in the third row, clapping with genuine enthusiasm, no trace of the drunk billionaire who had challenged her 6 months ago. Backstage, Professor Kozlov was waiting with her characteristic bluntness. Was good, not perfect. You rushed the tempo in the third movement, and your pedaling in the second movement was sometimes too heavy, but was honest, was real. This is what matters most. Thank you, Sarah said, for everything. Kozlov waved this away. You did the work. I only told you what you needed to hear. She paused, then added more gently, your mother would be proud. Sarah had to look away, her throat too tight for words. In the lobby afterward, Sarah found herself surrounded by well-wishers, students from the conservatory, other audience members, people she didn't know who wanted to tell her how moved they had been by her playing. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Marcus waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching. "That was remarkable," he said simply. "It was messy," Sarah corrected. "I made mistakes." "I didn't hear mistakes. I heard someone telling a story that needed to be told." He smiled. "So, how does it feel? Being back?" Sarah considered this. How did it feel? Exhausting, exhilarating, like she had been holding her breath for 23 years and could finally exhale, like she was 48 years old and just starting her life, like she had betrayed her younger self by leaving and redeemed her by returning. "It feels like I'm not done yet," she said finally, "like this is just the beginning." "Good," Marcus said, "because I have some news about the Arts Initiative. We've received over 300 applications in the first month, stories like yours, people who had to choose between their art and survival. I need you to help me figure out how to help them." Sarah thought about the 300 applications, 300 people who had been forced to choose between their dreams and their lives. She thought about how arbitrary it all was, that she had been lucky enough to have Marcus Chen walk past her at the right moment, lucky enough to be challenged in exactly the way she needed to be challenged. "We can't save everyone," she said. "No, but we can save some, and those some will save others. It ripples out." "That sounds optimistic." "Maybe I'm learning optimism from you." Sarah laughed, a real laugh, and realized it had been a long time since she had laughed like that. "I have practice early tomorrow. I should go." "Of course. But Sarah..." Marcus waited until she looked at him. "I meant what I said earlier. You earned this. Not because I gave you an opportunity, but because you had the courage to take it, to try again when you had every reason not to." After Marcus left, Sarah stood alone in the emptying lobby, her concert clothes slightly damp with sweat, her hands still tingling from the performance. Through the windows, she could see San Francisco at night, the lights of the city spreading out like an answer to all the darkness she had walked through to get here. She thought about calling someone to share the moment with, but there wasn't really anyone to call. Her mother was gone. She had lost touch with most of her Juilliard friends years ago. She was still learning to build a life in this new world she had entered. But maybe that was okay. Maybe you didn't always need someone else to validate your victories. Maybe sometimes it was enough to stand alone in a theater lobby, your hands remembering the weight of piano keys, your heart remembering what it felt like to do the thing you were born to do. Sarah pulled out her phone and opened the Photos app. She scrolled back to a picture she had saved months ago, her mother at Sarah's Juilliard acceptance letter celebration, beaming with pride that was almost painful to look at. Sarah had avoided this photo for years, but now she could stand to see it, could even smile at the memory. "I played tonight, Mom," she whispered to the image. "I know you were there. I know you heard." The lobby lights were being shut off one by one. Sarah gathered her things and headed for the exit. Tomorrow, she would start reviewing applications for the Arts Initiative. Tomorrow, she would have another lesson with Professor Kozlov. Tomorrow, she would continue the slow, difficult, beautiful work of rebuilding a life in music. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply walk through the San Francisco streets, her hands in her pockets, humming the Schubert sonata under her breath. Somewhere in this city, someone else was cleaning an office building, invisible to the people whose spaces they maintained. Someone else was lying in a hospital bed, watching their dreams disappear under the weight of medical bills. Someone else was making impossible choices between survival and calling. Sarah couldn't fix the system that had broken her and would break countless others. She couldn't make healthcare affordable, or make art a sustainable career, or erase the cruel randomness of who got second chances and who didn't. But she could play, she could teach, She could use whatever platform Marcus's money had given her to pull a few people back from the edge, to remind them that talent doesn't disappear just because circumstances bury it. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something, and something was infinitely better than the silence she had lived in for 23 years. Sarah reached the BART station, descended into the bright fluorescent underground, and waited for the train that would take her home. Not to the studio apartment in Oakland anymore, but to a modest one-bedroom in Berkeley, close to the conservatory, with room for the upright piano Marcus had insisted on including in her benefits package. As the train pulled away from the platform, carrying her toward her new life, Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel everything. The joy and the grief, the loss and the return, the impossible distance between who she had been and who she was becoming. The music was still there. It had always been there, waiting. And now, finally, Sarah was ready to listen.